Some stories are too strange to be true, but what if the desert keeps its truths under the sand like teeth? What if the next headlight you see in your rear view is not a car at all, but something that learned your rhythm and now paces you breath for breath? Welcome back to my channel, Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. From radios that whisper your name to mile markers that count down your choices. Every story here is a mystery waiting to unfold. Which story creeped you out the most? Let us know in the comments. Story 1. 13 miles of static. I did not believe deserts had voices until my radio said my name through snow. One syllable from a mouth of needles, then the kind of silence that is not empty but crouching. If you have ever heard your name where no one should be, you know how the skin on your neck tightens and stays that way, like a seatbelt on a crash you have not had yet. I was running the last courier loop for Ruiz Logistics, a company made of 2 vans and a spare parts shelf that looked like it was built from promises. The payout on this run would clear my transmission bill and keep my boss from replacing me with a 20-year-old who never blinks. The desert at night is a contract you sign with your headlights. Everything beyond the beams is rumor. The air smelled like hot creosote, the kind of smell that says storms end badly out here. The first odd thing was the mile marker. 13. I checked it because I keep notes like a pilot. 13, then another 5 minutes, 13 again. I laughed out loud to nobody and said the county was cheap. 2 markers, 1 number. When I passed the 3rd, and it also said 13, I turned down the radio as if quiet would make sense arrive faster. That is when the static leaned forward and shaped itself into my name, gentle and wrong. I do not spook easily. The desert gives you space to sort fear into piles. But I've been told one rule that afternoon by the gas station attendant with the old tattoos and the permanent squint. Keep the radio on no matter what, he said, like a man passing along an allergy recipe. I asked why, and he clicked his mouth like he had bitten a seed. So I eased the volume back up until the hiss became a blanket I could live under. The gas gauge ticked down a hair, neat as a minute hand. I glanced at the clock. 12:47. It would be 2 a.m. when I hit the junction if I kept an honest speed and if the road stayed real. The headlights appeared in my mirror somewhere after the 4th 13. Not close. Not far. The way you set a glass on a table and check that it does not move. I tapped the brake enough to flash my taillights, and the other lights flickered too, the same rhythm, as if it were watching me the way I was watching it. A little game in the dark to see who flinches first. I picked up the CB, which I use like a rosary more than a tool. Channel 19 gave me the usual midnight choir. 2 truckers fighting over who cut who off outside Sundog. A man singing softly over a hum like a hive. Channel 9, for emergencies, was empty except for a breath. When I pushed the red button to talk, the air in the van changed temperature as if I had opened a door. I said, "Brake, brake, anyone running route 19 past marker 13? I got a tail on me not gaining, not losing." The breath on 9 answered with my name again, or maybe the idea of my name. I set the mic down like it might be hot. Unknown before danger. That is how it begins. My phone said no service and kept saying that as if I had asked a different question. The map in the passenger seat still had a coffee ring over the long loop where 19 bowed around the dry lake. I had meant to replace it for a clean copy, but the coffee ring had become familiar like a mole. I looked up, and the headlights behind me were slightly closer, close enough that I could pick out their color. Not warm like halogen, not blue like those expensive eyes people put in trucks. A pale amber that blinked without blinking. The first decision felt small. Pull over or keep the speed and pretend a shadow can be outrun. I chose to tap the blinker and nudge onto the shoulder, tires popping gravel, dust rising like a curtain. The other car did the same half a breath later, the same angle, the same hiss, neat as a mirror. My heart threw a soft punch behind my ribs. I killed my engine and the other engine died too. We were 2 people, or something like people, breathing side by side. I stepped out into heat that had no right to be in the night. The smell of creosote came again, stronger, as if someone had uncorked it. Down the road a little, maybe a quarter mile, a low amber hazard light clicked in a slow heartbeat. A stranded sedan sat there against the dark, a single triangle reflector propped crooked against its bumper. I called out, the way you do when you want a human voice to put your world back together. No answer, only the faraway crunch of someone else's tires on someone else's road. Behind me, the headlights that had been tailing me were gone. I looked hard and saw only my own van, my dented rear door reflected in the chrome of my bumper. The night folded itself a little closer. The stranded sedan's hazard light kept its measured metronome, as if it were keeping time for us both. I told myself that stranded people do not call out if they are sleeping or afraid or both, and that being decent is a choice you do not get to revoke later when it is inconvenient. I approached the sedan. It was a model a few years older than mine, silver trying to be moonlight. The license plate made my throat go dry. Same state, same 6 characters as mine. Even the little registration sticker with the month peeling at the corner. The only difference was the screws. Mine had star-shaped screws because the plate had tried to walk off a few months back, and I put in what the hardware store had. This sedan had normal Phillips screws, thoughtful and dull. I said hello again, and the radio in my van chose that moment to whisper. Not words. 13 little pops, evenly spaced like knuckles cracking on a patient hand. A figure sat in the driver's seat of the sedan, head bowed. Relief came like a wave you think is a shadow until it lifts your chest. I tapped the window, gentle. The man looked up, and for a second I saw myself. Not in a magic way. The way a parking lot at a grocery store reflects men with the same haircut and the same tiredness. He moved his mouth, but what came out was radio snow. No shape to it, but it carried meaning the way a laugh does even if you do not hear the words. He pointed past me toward my van. His finger trembled like an antenna looking for the right sky. I backed away, and the hazard light accelerated one click, like a metronome being nudged. The ambient sound changed, a soft clipping, as if the world were recorded on a tape and someone had started to rewind. I got back in my van and locked the doors because I am brave, but not foolish. The tail headlights reappeared, only this time they were not in my mirror. They were in my windshield, far ahead down the road, facing me, not moving. The radio gave 13 more pops, softer now, and in the spaces between them, my voice said, do not break. Rising tension is a staircase. The first step is not steep. The second makes your knees notice. The third is the one where you cannot see the top. I put the van in gear and pulled out, leaving the stranded sedan to its patient clicking. The phone still said no service. The clock said 101. The mile marker I passed said 13 again, which I swallowed the way you swallow a pill that does not want to go down. The map's coffee ring skulked by my thigh like something warm. The headlights ahead of me did not move, which was one kind of horror. The ones behind me, which had matched me signature for signature, were gone again, which was another. The radio static became a thinner hiss, like an old TV trying to say snow without the S. I turned the knob minutely, and the hiss stuttered into a tone I recognized as the same frequency the warehouse uses for the loading dock beeper. 13 tones, another 13, each set a hair closer together. A countdown. The gas gauge fell one needle width in a way that felt like a cruel joke because I had filled the tank at the last station, and gas does not leave that cleanly unless you invite it. The second step up the staircase was the voice itself. It was mine. I know how that sounds. But I know my own mouth like a mechanic knows his van, down to the timing chain rattle and the little whine on a cold start. My own voice, a few degrees lower, said the words I had just thought 3 minutes before, out of order, as if memory had been shaken like a box. Do not break. Keep the radio on. Look for the coffee ring. Then silence, the patient kind that sits across from you and waits to see which part of you moves first. The red herring in all this was the man in the stranded sedan. He seemed like a ghost because sometimes our eyes beg for a ghost to explain physics we do not like. But the detail that disproved it was in the plate screws. I saw it when I passed him again because of course the road brought me back without saying it had. His Phillips screws were shiny with newness, and the plate itself had a smudge of fingerprint oil I recognized as the kind you leave when you scrub a sticker on. He was not a haunting. He was a leftover recording in the loop, like a frame stuck in the projector. He was stuck on a night that was not mine, playing until someone fixed the reel. Isolation arrived then, like it had learned my name. CB dead except for breath. GPS redrawing the same figure 8 as if it were caught practicing. The truckers who always argue at this hour were gone. Not a single tinny laugh to hold on to. When I said hello to nobody, the radio answered with the smell of hot creosote again. It rolled through the van with the desert wind, stronger like a physical thing. That scent became my barometer. When it thickened, the loop was about to flex. When it thinned, a choice was coming. The meaningful choice was simple in the kind of way that ruins sleep. Between mile marker 13 and the invisible mile 0, there was a curve I could feel under the tires, a sweep to the right that asked me to ride the edge. A pair of amber hazards blinked in the gravel up ahead, luring, promising a person who could explain it all. I could stop, step into that metronome, and maybe talk to a voice that was even close to mine. Or I could keep speed and trust a future me who sounded tired and certain. I chose speed. I kept both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2 like a driving school saint, and I did not touch the brakes when the tone burst began, counting faster, 12, 11, 10, punching holes in the night like a sewing needle through skin. The immediate consequence was simple. The tail headlights returned in the mirror at a distance that made my shoulders crawl. The delayed echo was quieter. The gas gauge dropped another neat minute, and the dash clock jumped backward 1 minute. Then forward 2, making time into a coin doing a trick. Revelation came in layers. The mile markers were not measuring miles. They were measuring 13-minute loops, each with a window where the world overlapped itself like tracing paper. The road circled the dry lake in a bow. Yes, but the space between those 2 long bends was thinner than a road should be. When you pass mile marker 13 at the wrong time, you folded into the overlap. The loop stitched you there and pulled tight. The radio was the only thing that could pull the seam loose because sound moves through thin places like a hand under a door. That was why the attendant had told me to keep the radio on. Static is not nothing. Static is the noise of everything. You can tune a kind of everything if you are scared enough and lucky. The misdirection about the car that tailed me fell away then like a moth burning at a porch light. It did not chase me. It paced me because it was me from a loop I had not reached yet. The amber strange headlights in front of me were also mine later when the hazard lights had eaten the shape of my van and left only the signals. The desert was not performing a new trick. It was repeating the only trick it had and hoping I would not notice the difference in the screws. The point of no return is a phrase that should be reserved for bridges you can watch collapse behind you. But out here, there are bridges made of air. I reached under the back plate to check something that had bothered me since the start. The star-shaped screw on my license plate had been rattling all night. I worked it out with my fingers while driving in a straight line, which I will not recommend to anyone. The screw came free, and I used it like a tiny knob against the radio dial, a makeshift tuning key that let me find the exact taste of the static I had heard first. When I clicked into it, the world dimmed around the edges like a photo being exposed. The loop shivered and then locked. I knew by the scent of creosote, sudden and heavy, that I could not climb back over this fence, not without going through whatever waited in the dark part. The climax did not look like fireworks. It looked like the road going out. My headlights washed over nothing, and then over more nothing, and then over the idea of road the way a dream reconstructs a hallway you used to walk as a teenager. My future voice, lower, rasped in the radio, counting the 13-tone bursts one last time. When the last tone hit, I closed my eyes because sometimes faith is closing your eyes when the dark asks you to. I drove blind for 3 heartbeats, the kind you can count in your wrists and your gums if you're quiet enough, then opened them in time to see the coffee ring spot from the map appear in real life. A darker circle on the pale road, a stain shaped like a coin. Aim for the ring, said the voice that was mine and not mine. Do not break. If you break, you will be here again. If you do not break, you will be somewhere else. I kept my foot steady. The van rolled into the coin, and the radio broke into a single clean tone that was not any frequency I had ever heard. The headlights ahead of me, the ones that were mine and not, went out as if someone had snuffed a pair of candles. The hazard blink far down the shoulder stopped mid-blink. The smell of creosote lifted like a hand from it. The world tilted a degree to the left, the way an airplane does when the pilot shows you the city lights as a treat. Then the road returned, but it was different in the boring ways that matter. The asphalt had newer patches. The reflectors sat lower. The mile marker that came up on my right said 0 in a font that did not match any the county used on that stretch. Fallout is messy until it's quiet. My phone chirped back into service, and then, as if embarrassed by its own voice, fell silent. The clock on the dash read 2:19, which did not line up with anything I had lived. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine and waited for the world to catch up. The smell of creosote arrived one last time, faint like a memory coming to the door and leaving before you can open it. I checked my plates because I am the kind of man who wants proof even at the cost of sleep. The star screw was back in, seated tight, though I could not for the life of me remember doing it. The tiny groove I had worried into it with my fingernail earlier was not there anymore, which told me it had lived a different day than I had. When I stepped inside, my phone buzzed with a single voicemail from an unknown number time, stamped 1:13 a.m. I played it with my thumb held steady and my breath, trying to stay quiet. The message was only breathing at first, then a voice that was my voice said, "Do not break," and then said my name the way the radio had. And then there was a soft click as if someone had set a star-shaped screw on a dashboard. There was one more thing, the kind that sounds like a lie someone tells to keep a story alive. In the morning when I went back to the van, the odometer showed a bright new trip reading I could not reset. 13.0 miles. It does not tick no matter how far I drive. It sits there like a stuck second hand. If you ever find yourself between mile marker 13 and 0 on a desert loop with the smell of storms under your tongue, keep the radio on. Tune for your own voice. When it tells you to aim for the coffee ring, believe it. And if you hear a hazard clicking up ahead, do not stop to count. Some metronomes are there to keep you in time. Some are there to teach you a rhythm you will not escape. Story 2. The neon gas station that isn't there, the sign burned hot pink in a place the map swore was empty, a humming rectangle of promise floating over gravel where there should have been sage and stars. I was down to 1 bar on the gauge and one good idea in my head. So I took the exit I did not remember passing because sometimes the desert puts a door in front of you and dares you not to knock. I'm Lano Ortiz, freelance photographer, which means I live on light and invoices and the lies I tell myself about how close I am to the next big job. I was chasing a sunrise over red bishop arches, a set of stone ribs the magazines love, and if I missed first light, the client would call someone younger who works for exposure. My boyfriend, Nate, had texted me 3 hours earlier to ask if I really knew what I was doing. I told him yes and hit send before I could read that sentence out loud and hear the choke in it. The wind tasted metallic when I rolled the window down, like someone had been scraping coins together. The scent of ozone sat under it, soft and clean, as if a storm had chosen style over thunder. The station floated up out of the night and became real, one detail at a time. Glass panes unscarred by stickers, a row of pumps as straight as teeth, an old-style price sign that still used numbers you could hear click if you listened. It looked new in the wrong way, like a set dressed to be old. I cut the engine and the silence held its breath. Then the neon coughed and steadied and the buzz settled into a human rhythm, the kind that slows when a person sleeps. Unknown before danger is a thing you learn if you drive alone at 3 a.m. You feel the difference between a place that wants you and a place that only looks like it does. The attendant watched me from behind glass. He had the ageless face of a man who has been 28 for 50 years. His eyes did not meet mine. They stayed a little to the left, like there was a mark on the air he preferred. He slid the drawer open with a smile he had learned from a help manual and said, "You made it just in time." I asked, "Time for what?" And he said, "The discount," and moved his hand like he was smoothing a sheet you could not see. The GPS on my dash said 49 minutes of nothing in any direction. No town here. No service roads. The little blue triangle pulsed in an empty beige square that felt like a joke. My phone had 4% battery and the screen brightness of a dying insect. I should have backed out then and taken my chances with a midnight prayer and a slow foot. But the needle sat on one bar, and my brain wrote a headline about a photographer found curled beside a rental filled with dust. I chose to believe in neon. At pump 3, the handle was colder than it should have been. The digits on the pump rolled up like a giggle. The smell of gasoline was mild, more like a memory of gasoline. I kept an eye on the gallons and waited for the click that says enough. The click did not come. The numbers climbed and climbed at the exact same pace, steady, as if the pump had been practicing its whole life for tonight. I squeezed the handle twice to break the flow, and nothing happened. The buzz of the sign rose half a note, then fell back like a breath. A moth hit the window of the glass door with a soft thwop, and its body shone for a second. Not a reflection, but a dull glow, like a night light that was thinking. The attendant came out without looking at me. He moved by watching the space beside me, holding a roll of paper towels that were perfectly new. He reached for the pump handle and put his fingers right over mine and did not flinch like a person would. The pump sighed. The numbers paused. He said, "Discount is automatic at this hour, and if you plan on using the restroom, do not look at the mirrors." He said it kindly, the way you tell a child to avoid the stove. I laughed because that is what you do when advice arrives inside a sentence shaped like a threat. He did not join me, so I let the laugh die. He went back inside, and the moth hit the glass again, as if it hated its own reflection. I pulled the nozzle free. Gas dripped slower than it should have. I shook it once, and went inside to pay, because some rituals are glue for the world, and I needed the cashier to make mine stick. The receipt printer spoke first. It stuttered and spat a gray strip that said tomorrow's date at the top in tall, polite numbers. I stared at it. Tomorrow at 3:17 a.m., itemized. Regular gas. 2 bottles of water I had not yet bought. A bag of sunflower seeds I never eat. I looked at the attendant, and he kept his gaze on the place to my left and said, "Your total is $13.13, which meant the discount was cute or the math had been teaching itself tricks. Unknown before danger, again. The mirrors behind the soda case did not like me. I could feel it. I do not know how to explain feeling a mirror looking back, but it is like standing near a window on a winter night and noticing your own heat flow toward the glass. The attendant saw my eyes slide and said, "Restroom is through that door. Key is on the red fob. Do not look at the mirrors," and he made the do not part sound like a bedtime story. I said, "Why?" And he said, "It is bad luck," and smiled a manual smile. I took the key and told myself I would keep my eyes on the floor. I did not. I'm a photographer. The restroom was a white square with a single bulb that hummed along with the neon. The mirror over the sink was clean, too clean, the kind of clean that says no one has ever tried to leave a message here with their finger. I raised my eyes like a person testing a fence. I saw my back, not a trick of a second mirror. Not a corner reflection. My back, hairline wrong by half an inch, camera strap across my shoulder I had not been wearing since last weekend. The figure in the mirror reached up and touched the place where the strapped in had been, and I felt it like a memory, not a touch. My stomach folded and unfolded like a napkin. I lowered my eyes, and the bulb flickered in shorts and longs, not random. Morse, my brain said, the hobby I keep secret, because people think you learn to talk to ghosts. The pattern repeated. Short, short, long. Short, long, long. A loop. A countdown. I put my hand over my heart the way my grandmother taught me when airplanes flew low. The first beat of the dread ladder had been the pump that never ended. The second stood here, making a private language in the light. The third announced itself when I stepped out and discovered the world had been mirrored. The highway was gone. Where the on-ramp had been, there was only a black hum that looked like distance. The parking lot repeated itself twice, then stopped, like someone had copied and pasted asphalt without understanding corners. The neon sign read, right to left in the glass of the storefront and left to right in the air, both correct, which is the same as both wrong. The moth fell onto the welcome mat with a whisper and did not glow anymore. I turned in a circle and felt the air cling to my shoulders like plastic. I walked to the counter holding the restroom, key like a charm. The attendant had arranged 3 receipts on the counter the way a dealer lays cards. They all had tomorrow's date, and my name typed at the bottom as if I had signed something with a hand I did not recognize. He said, "Do you want your waters now?" and slid them forward. The bottles were full, sweating cold, the caps medical clean. I had not chosen brands. He had. I said, "What is this place?" and heard my voice and liked it less than I ever had. He said, "We're the last station before the emptiness," and looked a little to my left again like the air had told a joke. I tried the door. It did not open. He held up a key ring with a duplicate of the red fob and said, "Just a moment, we are about to reset." The neon coughed and the buzz changed key, lower, deeper, like a person trying to sing in a register that hurts. I checked my phone. 2%. 1. It died while showing me the photo of the arches I was meant to take at sunrise. I tapped the screen twice like that would bring it back. The printer hiccuped and pushed out another strip. It read the same total, the same date, but the time was 1 minute earlier than the last receipt. Time was walking in place. Help failed quickly. No service on the dash. The blue triangle turned into a square, and then a polite, that did not move. The radio under the window slotted a cassette into itself without a hand and began to play a gum commercial from 25 years ago. The attendant looked at the space to my left and said, "You can still make it to your arches if you leave during the quiet seconds." And I said, "Which seconds are those?" And he said, "Do not look at the mirrors." The consequences arrived on schedule. The buzz of the sign began a definite pattern. Short, short, long. Pause. Short, long, long. Pause. The same 4 counts repeating, but closer together, like a heart that had read bad news. The air pressure in the store changed. My ears clicked. Somewhere in the soda case, a bottle sighed, as if it had decided to live. The attendant turned the key on the door very slowly and said, "You can leave if you promise not to look up." I nodded. He did not open it. I made the choice myself. Choices live in the body before the mind says them out loud. I swung the door and stepped into the heat. The moth on the mat dragged itself onto the edge of my shoe and lifted its wings like tired paper. The neon said 003 in a way that was not exactly numbers. I did not look up. I walked toward the van with my eyes on the moth, willing it to glow again so I could pretend I was in the correct hour. The pump at Bay 3 clicked back into its holster with a sound that could have been triumph. The road was not there. I did not see a fence or a wall or even a horizon. There was gravel that repeated twice, then stopped, and beyond it a black softness that borrowed light and did not return it. I said Nate's name out loud because saying a name is proof of something. It hung in the air like a radio signal with no station to hit. In the glass I saw my back again, reflected at a slight delay, as if the mirror were watching an old live feed of me. The version of me in the glass turned her head a second late and mouthed, "Do not," and I could not tell if she meant the mirrors or the door or all of it. Revelation is rarely a trumpet. Most nights, it is a person you have already met saying a sentence you only now hear. The station was not a haunt. It was a habit, a loop that replayed the last choices of people who came through with not enough gas and too much hope. It needed someone to do something different. The red herring had been the ghost town story I carry like a pocket knife because it makes better conversation than truth. The detail that disproved it was on the receipts. The signature at the bottom was mine, but the halves of the L did not connect the way I have made them since 4th grade. Someone had typed me. Someone had rehearsed me. The countdown entered the small numbers. The neon settled into 2 shorts and a long, then 1 long and a pause, and the buzz made a little shiver in my teeth. The moth on my shoe lifted its body, and for a heartbeat glowed again, a patient candle, then went dark. I understood that the glow meant present time. Whatever did not draw the moths was not here. The mirrors did not draw them. The attendant did not either. He watched my left and held the keys in his right hand like a talisman he had forgotten how to use. I picked one thing I could break. It is not wise. It is human. The sign was a box on 2 white poles, and the letters were plastic with hard edges, the kind that cuts a hand you put in the wrong place. I climbed the low-service ladder and swung the rusty maintenance bar that lay under it. The attendant called out, "Do not," in a voice that finally looked at me, and I swung anyway. The bar hit the corner of the sign, and the pink went white, and then black, and the buzz stopped like it had been strangled. The immediate consequence was silence. The kind you can hear move. The store lights died. The pumps froze with their numbers halfway between digits. The mirrors went matte, like cloudy ice, and for a second my breath fogged them from the wrong side. The delayed echo came as a humming from under the gravel, a deep animal sound that made the moths lift in a shiver. The world had been held together by a frequency. I had cut the note. The point of no return is a door you do not see until it shuts behind you. I felt it shut. The sky did not change. The heat did not either. But every line in the place sharpened, as if the set had chosen to be real for once. The attendant stood very still, keys held up in both hands like an offering, and said, "Now you must pick a mirror." The phrase felt like a dare and a prayer. I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if you do not, you will stand outside until your body thinks standing is a life." The mirrors began to wake. One by one they cleared. In each pane, there was a version of me with a tiny wrong detail. Hair an inch shorter. A jacket I had lost last winter. A camera the model before mine. Their mouths moved with my sentences at the wrong speed and without sound. Behind some of them, I saw the highway, healthy and long, and behind others the black softness I hated. The buzzing returned as a thinner thread, a singing wire someone plucks in a basement. The neon was dark and still, but its absence had become a sound. The choice pressed down. I could put my hand on one mirror and follow the woman who wore the jacket I missed, and maybe believe I was stepping backward toward a better hour. Or I could choose the one that reflected me as I am, with the strap mark on and the circle under my left eye that shows up on nights like this. I looked down for a vote from a moth. It had crawled to the edge of my shoe again and lifted its wings. In the mirror to my right, the same moth did not move. The light loves the present. It does not care for copies. I put my hand to the glass that showed the living insect. Cold flooded my palm, then heat, then that soft hum again as the loop made room. The glass felt deeper than a pane, wider, as if a hallway began inside it. The other versions of me leaned forward, mouths open, and for a second I thought they were warning me off, but the shapes of the words looked like go. The attendant turned his face straight on me for the first time, and I saw that he had my eyes tilted and the same small scar on the left brow from when I fell off my aunt's porch at 5. He nodded once, slow, like a metronome completing its measure. I stepped. The sound went thin and high, a dentist drill far away, and then it was gone, and the door of the station was in front of me, open, and beyond it the highway lay like a ribbon that believed in itself. The sky had that pale seep that means the night is tired of pretending. The pump stood still and honest. The sign was dark, cracked at the corner where I had struck it, but without the buzz, it looked harmless, a bad idea nailed to 2 poles. The attendant was outside, sweeping dust that did not need sweeping. He did not look up. He spoke to the space a little left of me and said, "You made it just in time." I did not wait to correct him. I set the bottles on the seat, turned the key, and the engine caught on the second, try like a friend who changed their mind. The moth rode the dash for a moment, wings lifting in a tired, living rhythm, and then drifted off toward the morning. I took the exit the map did not admit existed and found myself on Route 6 with mile markers that added up. My phone woke long enough to show me 511 and the bars returned like a favor I had earned. The arches would glow if I hurried. I could make it. I could deliver something beautiful and call it proof that night has rules. I reached for the receipt without looking. The paper was warm from my palm and smelled faintly of clean rubber, like a new ball. The date at the top was tomorrow. The time down to the minute was not a time I had lived yet. In the sun visor mirror, my face stared back. My face only, no delay, no double. The tiny circle under my left, I seemed lighter already. I told myself it was the angle. I drove until the sign was a dark line in the rear view, then a darker idea, then gone. The road climbed gently. The first red lit the edges of the stone ribs exactly on cue. Light does what it wants, but on some mornings it is merciful. I got the shots I had promised. I even got one better, the kind you do not post because it belongs to the day it was taken. I sent a message to Nate that said made it, and his reply arrived a moment later with too many emojis for Dawn. I did not mention the station. I did not mention the moth that had settled on a mirror above me and beat its wings as slow as a sleepy heart. At a pullout, I finally looked. The moth glowed faintly in the bright, which should not happen, and the veins in his wings formed little slashes and lines that did not feel random. Short, short, long. Short, long, long. I laughed, quietly, because the sound would have broken me if I let it be loud. The motif had followed me out, or maybe I had never left. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket and felt the numbers like a thin heat against my thigh. I know you wanted to say I threw it away, that I broke the loop by disrespecting it. I did not. I am not that brave. It sits in my wallet now, tomorrow's date in tomorrow's ink, and sometimes at night I feel heat through the leather when the clock hits the hour stamped on it. If you find yourself on a road where something bright hums where there should be dark, ask a moth for directions. If it glows on your hand, you are still in the hour you earned. If it does not, do not look at the mirrors. Story 3. Channel 0 on the Desert CB. The first time I heard Channel 0, the desert lifted the hair on my arms like it had leaned in to speak. His became a thin voice saying my name, not loud, not urgent, just familiar, the way someone says your name when you're almost asleep and they need you to wake without fear. The road ahead was a ribbon with teeth marks. Heat was long gone, but the smell of hot dust and pennies crept through the vents as if the air remembered sunlight and wanted me to remember it too. I run night tows for basin recovery. That means I collect the broken, the overheated, and the unpaid, and I bring them back to the lot behind the office, where the wind makes the flag snap like mean laughter. Tonight, I had one last call on 50, way past the ghost of a way station that has not weighed anything since my father was a rookie. My boss thinks I am too soft on stranded drivers. He is probably right and probably alive because of someone soft. The CB is my companion, my conscience, and occasionally my warning system when the desert starts telling jokes. It was quiet until it was not. Channel 19 had turned into the clink of someone eating from a metal pot, a little chorus of forks, then a squeak that might have been a chair or a bat. I toggled to 9, just in case, and the only thing there was my own static. My mic has a bad switch. It sticks if I squeeze too long. Sometimes it broadcasts my breathing for a mile or two. I clicked it twice to make sure it was off and heard the relay under the dash do its tiny cricket song. The blue of the dash lights made my hands look a little dead. At the Ghost Way station, the analog clock above the dark window read 2:17. It always reads 2:17. The first time I noticed that I took out my phone to take a picture and the screen died, then came back showing the same time as the clock. Tonight, I did not raise my phone. I nodded to the weightless building like you nod to an old teacher, then eased back onto the highway with my hazards off and my headlights patient. I had a mile or two before the turnoff for a stranded sedan. The printed ticket said mile 44, shoulder, probable overheating. Driver left a voicemail that sounded like chewing on fear. The first odd thing was mile marker 41. The metal plate had been shot 3 times in a neat triangle that pointed east into scrub. I had seen that pattern before, but my brain did not know where to put it. As I rolled past, the CB hiss fluffed up and became a whisper. Not mine. Not anybody's I know. It said Eli the way my sister says it when she wants me to stop being stubborn. Then the line crackled and the smell of hot pennies got stronger. I lifted my foot without meaning to, and the engine made a thinking sound instead of pull. I clicked to 19 to make myself feel less alone and got the laughter of men who were not there. I clicked back to 9 and got silence that felt full. The relay under the dash clicked faster, a cricket that had learned how to count. The charm my sister braided last summer hung off the rear view. It is just thread and a cheap bead, but it has followed me longer than inventory suggests it should. The threads had begun to loosen, one tiny spiral unwinding, shivering when a bump moved air. I told myself I would glue it later, then told myself I had said that before. The first disturbance was not the voice. It was the dead zone inside the headlights. Light fell, but it seemed to skate across something that did not reflect. The asphalt looked like a photo of asphalt, grainy and printed in a hurry. The white lines had been painted a hair to the right of where the road wanted them to be. The cricket relay under the dash sped up until it sounded like a counting toy, then stopped dead when I lifted the mic. I did not press the button. I held it close to my mouth and said my name anyway, like a person leaving a message. The CB whispered back with the tiniest delay, "Eli," and then my mouth moved on its own. Foreshadowing hides best in things you would fix if you were not busy. The mix push to talk likes to stick, and sometimes I talk to myself without meaning to while the whole road listens. The bullet holes in 41 made a triangle that my eyes kept drawing even when I looked at the gauges. The ghost station clock sat in my head at 2:17 the way a song does. The charm unwound another tiny circle. In the scrub to my right, a small herd of burros lifted their shaggy heads and brayed once, all together, then shut up as if a hand had covered their mouths. I did not like that. Animals have better contracts with the dark than we do. The first rising beat began when Channel 0 opened like a door I had walked past 1,000 times. It is not a real channel. You cannot turn to it. It turns to you. The CB warmed under my hand in a lazy way that made me think the truck had fever. Hiss organized into syllables that sounded like my name said at a distance. "Eli, do not stop at the sedan. The sedan is your idea of help." The voice was thin, far less than a whisper, full of fatigue and dust. I wanted to ask, "Who is this?" And I wanted to pretend to believe the always answer. I did neither. I watched the lines on the road and the patch of not reflection that rode with me like a passenger. I dropped to 30. The relay clicked like a nervous habit. The burros appeared again, this time to the left, ears and shoulders gray and shadow, eyes reflecting like nails. They brayed once and kicked at the dirt. I passed mile 42 and the CB whispered again. "You are hearing this late," said the voice that had my cadence and my mouth shape without my confidence. "If you stop at 44, you will meet me. If you meet me, you will not leave." It sounds like the sort of drama truckers tell to stay awake. It did not feel like a story. It felt like my jaw when I clench at night. The second rising beat was the stranded sedan itself. It sat on the shoulder with its hazards ticking slow, proud, and wrong. The rear bumper had the same sticker as my ex's old car, a faded sun. The plate had 2 letters that matched mine. The driver stood with her hood up, waving a small flashlight like an apology. Her silhouette looked familiar in the way everyone is a cousin at night. I slowed enough that she could see my logo, Basin Recovery, and I tapped the siren once, a polite little chirp. She did not smile. She lifted the light to her face, and the beam fell clean. My foot found the gas without instruction. The CB did a small burst that was not sound. I did not know how else to say it. Something touched my ear that was not pressure and not volume. The voice spoke between those notches and said, "Keep straight for the triangle." I passed the sedan at 40. The driver set the light down and put her palms on the hot hood and bowed her head as if praying to a god of radiators. I want to be the man who stopped. I had been that man 100 times. I have pulled people back into their lives by the belts of their coats. Channel 0 made that part of me sit down. The third rising beat tightened the screws. The road ahead narrowed into a dark patch that the light did not like, a place where the asphalt looked filmed like a memory taped over and over. The relay under the dash stopped clicking and held itself in a tight whine. The burros brayed from the right, and then from the left, lining the scrub like a jury. The unwinding thread on the charm let go one more little circle until the bead hung heavy at the end, pointing right, a compass that remembered a different ship. The CB whispered a number the way a person breathes. 2, 17. The clock in my head answered like a prayer you cannot forget. Isolation arrives in layers. My phone had service, then did not. The office pinged me on the tablet with a new ticket, then the screen washed white and returned to the login page like it had gotten shy. The headlights bit less. The engine temperature needle wobbled in a way that suggested superstition and then steadied out of politeness. The dead patch in the road grew wider until it felt like a lake I was not allowed to admit. The sedan's hazard shrank behind me. The driver did not wave anymore. In the mirror, she stood with her hands on the hood and her head down and did not move. That fixedness frightened me more than any chase. Communication failed where it mattered most. I toggled the CB to 19 and said a name I trust, a driver who runs the stretch and always has a joke, and the only answer was the sound of people eating from metal bowls again. The mic switch stuck down without my consent, and I heard my breathing come back to me thin and soft. The relay under the dash sang a tight, high note like a tuning fork. I wrapped the mic against my knee and the button released. The knot reflection on the road lifted a degree and became a gloss of nothing. I could feel my chances narrowing as if the air had squeezed the width of my windshield. Revelation came in a sentence my own mouth had already practiced. Channel 0 was not a frequency. It was a timing. The ghost station clock at 2:17. The triangle of holes at 41 pointing to a place that only existed when the loop thinned. The animals making a choir only when the door cracked open. The unwinding thread that acted like an antenna braid when you try to make a radio from a coat hanger and a prayer. The voice on the CB was not a stranger. It was me later, thinner, tired from trying too many times to get me to listen. The red herring pretended to be the woman at the sedan, a simple rescue I could stack on the others I carry like trophies I never dust. She felt like truth because helping is the most efficient lie. The detail that disproved her was the beam that went through her face. Light loves faces. It sits on bone. It returns from teeth and leaves warmth on nose ridges and cheeks. The beam went through and did not come out. She was a repeat. I do not know from what year or whose story. A held frame in whatever film plays out here when the hour repeats. If I stopped, I would find proof that no longer helps in anyone. I might even find me. The point of no return was small enough to fit in my palm. The charm's threads had unwound themselves into a loose tail, and the bead swung like a pendulum that had learned my engine's idle. I took it in my fingers and unwound it the rest of the way, a slow pull that lifted a smell of hot dust and copper into the cab, as if I had cracked a jar. The bead dropped against my knuckles. The relay under the dash clicked once. The CB hiss became a tone. I had retuned the truck without meaning to. I had also pushed away the last ordinary way out. If I tied the thread again, the knot would be wrong. I would not get back to the hour I started in. The climax waited where the triangle pointed. I rolled off the highway at 41 and put the truck into the scrub, tires shouldering through creosote and low brittle grass. There is no service road there for daylight drivers. There is one when Channel 0 opens. It runs straight for maybe 400 yards and then humps up into a narrow ridge that falls on both sides into dry, gravelly arroyos. The burrows lined it like audience, warned me by braying once, then went quiet. The smell of pennies got into my mouth. The CB whispered my name and then whispered a set of numbers that were not a combination and not a weather report. 2, 1, 7. I answered without the button and heard my answer before I finished speaking. The dark patch followed, but the truck liked this road better. The suspension made kinder noises. The tires bit something that was not asphalt and seemed to be thankful. Ahead, the ridge narrowed to a tight pinch. On the left, a shape the size of a shed quivered like heat mirage. On the right, between two low stones, the air looked a little brighter, as if a kitchen light was on behind a thin curtain. The CB whispered with my mouth how to aim, and the cricket relay under the dash made a long, steady click, held, and let go like a breath you forgot you were holding. I cut the headlights because the voice that was mine told me to cut them. The world did not go black. It went honest. Starlight laid a thin tablecloth on the road, and the burro's eyes became two lines of little moons. I steered for the bright slit and felt the truck rise on its springs as the road lifted and narrowed. Something brushed the undercarriage and made a sound like a metal tongue. The CB said now in my voice, and I mashed the mic button until my thumb hurt. The stuck switch did its bad habit and locked. The open mic made a ringing I felt in my teeth. The smell of dust and copper bloomed until I thought I had bit a penny in half. The tone built inside the hiss and then lanced outward like a stake, and a shed sized shape to the left pulled itself apart like wet paper. There was nothing behind it. There was the rest of the ridge and a night that had been waiting for me to choose where to put it. I came out over the arroyo, and the truck's rear wheels scrabbled and found grip because my future self had already made this mistake enough times to teach my hands what to do. I did not brake. I did not speak. The burros let go a second bray that sounded like laughter and then moved away, orderly, toward the eastern side of the scrub. The ridge fell into a two-rut track that any rancher could travel at noon and that I could travel right now only because I had the thread off and the mic hot and the relay clicking a tone I would hear in my sleep. I breathed when the CB stopped telling me my name. Fallout is always smaller than you think until you find it in the place that stays quiet. The truck put its tires back on asphalt near mile 47, which is a place I have never seen from that angle because daylight roads do not join there. The air cooled like someone had moved a fan. The smell of copper let go. The ghost station clock was behind me by a measure I could not write down. My tablet logged in on its own and displayed the ticket I'd been meant to run, then marked it completed without me touching the screen. I did not look back for the sedan. I knew it would exist and not exist at the same time, like all the mistakes we rehearse until they grow their own weather. At a turnout by an old cattle guard, I stopped and let the engine idle. The cricket relay went quiet. The charm lay across my palm, loose threads white against my grease. I tied the braid back as close as I could to the way my sister had done it last summer, but the bead sits now at a slightly different angle and it will not pretend otherwise. The CB was only hiss. When I toggled to 19, the men had stopped eating. Someone told a joke I missed the beginning of, and another man laughed as if it were the only food in the county. I delivered a van with a blown head to a house that smelled like coffee and clean rugs. I wrote up the bill, and the woman tipped me with that guilty gratitude people feel for nights that end in tow trucks and not in funerals. I nodded like I deserved it. On the way back through the way station, I did not look at the clock. The relay did not click. A burro stood in the road and watched me pass with the sigh of an animal that has seen smarter versions of me. I put the truck in park a block from the lot and sat for a minute with my hands on the wheel and my eyes closed, the way you do after a prayer you have not told anyone about. There is one thing I cannot make fit. On my service log, the notes for tonight include a line I did not write. Location adjusted per channel 0. Technician authorized. The signature looks like mine if I'd been hurrying. The timestamp reads 2:17. If I bring it to the boss, he will tell me I typed it and forgot. If I bring it to my sister, she will hum and tie the charm tighter and tell me to be home before dawn on Sundays. When I turn the CB off now, sometimes it takes an extra second, and in that second the speaker breathes like a person asleep in the next room. It says my name the way you say a name when you want a future to hear you. Story 4. The car that mirrors my moves the first time the other car clicked its blinker, mine had not. That is what kept me awake, the tiny amber pulse in the dark ahead, a decision that should have been mine appearing before I made it. If you have ever watched your hand gesture in a window before your fingers move, you know the particular dread that sits behind the tongue and waits. My name is Kellen, night courier for a telecom subcontractor with a name that sounds bigger than it is. I was hauling a silver case with replacement optics for a microwave tower, the kind of job that keeps you paid and anonymous. If I made the handoff before 2:30, the rental app would not turn my little sedan into a statue. If I failed, the immobilizer would cut the engine and my boss would cut me from the list. That is the ladder. Livelihood, reputation, sanity, body last, but not by much on a desert highway. The desert tasted like cold iron. The sky was clear enough to make the road look like a river someone had polished. A billboard for a missing person slid by, just a silhouette with a blank oval where a face should be. The rentals lane keep chirped twice on a gentle bend, cheerful, helpful, useless. I almost laughed. Then I heard the same double chirp come back from ahead, a half second late, too polite to be an echo. My hands tightened on the wheel until the leather creaked. I saw it just past mile 23, pacing me in the opposite lane, not passing, not falling back. A compact, same generation as mine. Same roofline. The headlight's signature matched, those narrow slits the marketing people love. It held speed like a man balancing a tray. I tested with a tap of the signal. My tick-tick answered clean, and the car ahead lifted its own signal 3 heartbeats later and let it blink once before canceling. Not a driver playing games. Not a coincidence. A mirror that had learned to anticipate. I told myself the obvious story. Someone bored. Someone with a scanner and a sense of humor, copying what they heard to make me twitch. The chemical scent of coolant slid through the vents, cold and sweet, the way a broken hose smells when it has not bled yet. Unknown before danger. The turn signal, the chirps, the smell, all small things that form shape if you let them. I checked the app. Coverage zone in 47 miles. Immobilizer countdown pulsing in neat gray numbers. 2 hours and 4 minutes when I looked, then a blink later it said 2 hours and 3, which made me think of teeth counting time. The case buckled beside me clicked once, metal on metal, like it had heard me read the screen. A soft tap touched the passenger window. It was so light I could have blamed a moth, but there are nights when you know you've been tapped by an intention. I breathed slow, the way my aunt taught me for panic, and rode the next curve. The lane assist chirped twice like a happy bird. The car ahead chirped back on a delay, then matched my speed within a half mile an hour. I coasted down to 65. It did the same. I rolled up to 72 and held there so the app would not complain. It came with me like a partner who knows the step. Beat 1 came on a long grade that climbs past the old solar array. The road edges there are sprinkled with glass pebbles, a spill from somebody's truck years ago, glittering like spilled salt under starlight. The other car's headlights made the pebbles wink in a pattern that felt like a language I had forgotten. The smell of coolant thickened for a breath, then went away. My turn signal ticked once without my hand. It does that sometimes when the stalk is barely nudged. The car ahead clicked its own once, as if agreeing that it would have done the same, and something in my scalp tightened. I toggled the lane assist off. A calm gray icon went dark. For 1 mile the world was mine alone. The other car drifted a foot and corrected, a human move, a small sin. Then my car chirped twice anyway, as if the system were not off, and the car ahead chimed in on its delay like a duet. I said out loud, no, and heard how thin I sounded. The case buckled again, a sympathetic flinch. A second tap tickled the passenger glass. Beat 2 stood waiting at the cattle guard that announces the long straight to the county line. The rails ring like a coin when you hit them. I feathered through and listened to the note fade. The other car rode its own rails a heartbeat later. The ring returned, same pitch, less body, as if the sound had been played through a phone and sent back. The missing person billboard returned, another copy, another blank oval. My reflection in the rear view looked smooth where my crow's foot should be. I blinked and it came back. For a moment, I believed the mirror was erasing detail from me to make me easier to copy. The app chimed with a polite cruelty. 1 hour and 38. I did the math and knew I would make it if I did not slow for nonsense. The nonsense kept pace. The other car's driver, if there was a driver, never turned its head. The windshield was a black coin. The double chirp came again, and this time the second chirp arrived before the first, a tiny inversion like a hiccup in a metronome. I said, "Did you feel that?" to no one, and the passenger window answered with the softest tap. Beat 3 crested near the dry wash bridge where the road lines have been repainted 3 times. There are ghost lines there, pale and wrong. I followed the fresh ones and felt the tires hum like contented cats. The other car followed the fresh ones too, then flickered onto a ghost line and rode it for half a second, a hard stutter before snapping back. Delay and error, like a reflection traveling across a cracked mirror. The scent of coolant lifted again. The desert came into the cabin and sat down beside me like an old friend with bad news. I tried to talk to it. I have done stupider things. I eased the window down and said, "What do you want?" And my own turn signal answered from ahead in a single click, then the echo, then silence. The app chimed again, now with a red that said weak coverage. The countdown skipped a minute in a way that made me feel watched. The case clicked in annoyance. The passenger glass tap came twice, like knuckles on a door you pretend not to hear. Isolation is not only a lack of people. Sometimes it is an abundance of wrong signals. The CB was dead. My phone showed one bar and then showed none. The lane assist icon dimmed, as if it were a candle feeling a draft. The highway shoulders widened as if the road had taken a deep breath. The stars poured their attention on the glass pebbles by the solar array entrance, and every glitter felt like an eye. I flashed my brights, quick and scolding. The other car did the same 3 beats late, like a friend copying a joke and getting the timing almost right. I considered pulling over. I considered braking hard. I considered turning onto the maintenance road that noses toward the panels and then slumps into a rope of sand. Each choice came with a price I could not afford. If I pulled over, the immobilizer timer would favorite itself and the app would win. If I braked hard and the other car braked late, we would share a clean physics lesson and I would meet the inside of my airbag. If I turned onto sand, the copy might learn to swim where I would drown. I kept speed and felt the shape of my options narrow like a funnel. Consequence can be kind if you pay early. I paid by admitting I was afraid. I told the empty cabin, I am scared, and my voice sounded protective and honest. The turn signal ticked once as if patting my arm. The case settled. My hands loosened a little. The chemical sweetness thinned. The other car held a perfect line for 100 yards, obedient as a dog practicing. Revelation arrived in small pieces, like bolts on a garage floor. The double chirp was the mirror's delay, a fixed beat I could count on. The glass pebbles by the solar array made a seam on the world, and the seam threw back any light with greed. The other car behaved best when my lights touched glitter. It made its mistakes on dark asphalt and on those ghost paint lines. The taps on the passenger glass came when my eye went to the seam. Something in that pain noticed the other version of it, and what lives in glass likes its cousins. I realized the mirror did not want to hit me. It wanted to become me. It was learning my timing with every chirp. The red herring was the idea of a bored person, a prankster with a scanner. The detail that disproved it was the cattle guard ring coming back thin like a copied sound. People do not send sounds back through the ground. Reflection does. The second disproving detail sat in my mirror. The crow's foot at my left, I erased itself again for a breath. A blank oval where my face should be would be the logical end of that. I looked away before I could watch that math finish. I needed a move the mirror could not make. Not because it did not want to, because it did not have the input. The car ahead copied signals in chirps and light. It did not copy body heat or breath or the specific heavy of fear. It lived on sight and on whatever cheap radio ghosts my rental bled. I remembered how the lane icon stayed gray when I killed the system, then chirped anyway. The car had listened to my inputs even then. I would have to remove its ability to see me without removing my ability to see enough to stay alive. The point of no return was a jacket in my back seat. Canvas, dark, the one I bring for dawn. I pulled it forward with one hand, heart doing a hard dance, and thumbed the cruise control just long enough to slide the coat up and over the passenger window. The fabric clung. The cabin went a little quieter on that side. The faint chemical smell cut away as if I had installed a wall. The tap came once from the outside of the jacket and did not make it through. I cut the headlights. Not to zero, to parking brightness, just for a breath. The world slid toward dark. The other car's headlights stayed full. It did not know that I had taken away a pain. The move felt like stepping off a curb in the wrong city. The stars grabbed the road and made their salt. The glass seen by the array threw back 1,000 eyes. I lifted the headlights again, and in that moment, with the jacket still draped, the other car kept its brights pointed where my full beams had been, still copying the version of me it had last seen. Delay. Greed. The metronome hiccuped. I counted a beat and eased left toward the seam. The climax lives where you risk looking foolish to live. I signaled left and did not actually go. The tick-tick filled the cabin, kind and nervous. The other car flashed its own left signal 3 heartbeats late, then edged into the empty left lane that did not exist because the highway narrowed there to a bridge. I did not go. I straightened the wheel and went right instead in a firm sweep that would have earned me a lecture in any other night. The mirror, blind on my passenger side now, saw a ghost in my left signal and committed to a move that the world would not allow. Its wheel corrected with a jitter. Its headlights jittered. The cattle guard ring came back wrong, higher, like a plate tossed. I crossed the glitter seam at a shallow angle and felt a soft tug under the tires like silk. The pebbles spoke their tiny mirrors to my headlights, and I aimed for a thin tongue of pavement at the solar array entrance. The jacket slid down the window a foot. I slapped it back with my left hand without looking. The immobilizer app chimed in fury. 48 minutes, then 47, then a red bar. The case buckled and stayed down as if it had decided to trust me. The other car tried to become me. I could feel it in the way its signals now led mine by a breath, anticipating because it had learned in the last mile and wanted to show off. It signaled right, hungry. Its headlights reached for the glitter seam. I killed my headlights to parking again for a 2 count and watched the stars pour their attention on the pebbles alone. The mirror lost me in the dark because my passenger pane was still blind and my lights were no longer advertising. It took the seam without me. It aimed for the tongue of pavement I was not on. It learned a move I had not made. I eased onto the maintenance apron, a patch of honest concrete that turns into dirt 20 yards in. My tires found it like a memory of sidewalks. The jacket slipped half off and the tap came again, rapid, frustrated, then stopped. The scent of coolant lifted sharp and then went thin, as if a spill had decided not to be. The other car's headlights raked the seam and then swung past as if it had been flicked by a hand. For a second, the windshield coin flashed something not black. I saw the blank oval of the missing person billboard where a face should be. Then it was only glass again. The immobilizer app shouted without volume. Coverage weak. 39 minutes. I could hear my own breath. I could hear the tiny gears in the column. I could hear the car ahead do something desperate, a brake that had not been part of the past. It corrected toward where it thought I was. It did not have my jacket. It did not have my dark. It did not have my fear to steer by. Its tires bit the edge of the apron and then found nothing. The headlights slid down and left, carving the wash in a clean white. There was no impact I could hear, only a hush like fabric pulled. The lane assist chirped once in my car, a single sad bird. I did not go look. Do not judge me. Love your theories. Love your courage. This was math and breath and time. I kept the wheel steady and rode the apron to where it dipped back to asphalt near a chain link gate. My headlights came back full as if they had forgiven me. The jacket lay in my peripheral like a dead moth. I picked it up and let the passenger window drink the night again. The tap did not return. Fallout is a quiet animal. The app settled. Coverage acceptable. 29 minutes. The countdown chose to behave like a clock again. The case beside me warmed, a slow, pleased heat through the metal. My reflection in the mirror regained the small lines I have earned. The billboard for the missing person appeared a final time, and I looked straight at the blank oval and told it no. The solar array behind me went darker than a sky that crowded it with stars. The chemical sweetness faded until I could convince myself I had imagined it. The tower site rose out of the desert like a relic. The man on the night shift took the case with a thanks shaped like a yawn. He signed his name twice and shivered, even though the air was not cold. I think people feel the desert talking on them like static when they have been awake too long. My app cleared the immobilizer warning with a little confetti animation I resented. The car felt light as a folded chair. On the way back, the lane assist chirped twice on a curve. I tensed. Nothing answered. The cattle guard rang once and kept its own ring. I passed the wash and did not look down. I did glance at the glitter seam. It looked innocent, just a spill that had taken a liking to starlight. At my apartment, I parked under the pelican light, the one that hums and attracts sleepy insects like a hymn. In a glass door that faces the lot, my reflection lifted a hand a beat before I did. It was subtle, so small I could have called it nerves. Then it caught up and copied the real me with a perfect smile. If you have ever noticed a window greet you before you arrive, you know what I did next. I looked down until the glass had nothing left to steal. I went inside and draped the canvas jacket over the hall mirror without thinking. Habit now. I wish I could end the story with a ridgeline of rules. There's only this. When a car paces you and learns your rhythm, take one piece of yourself out of sight and make the move only a human hand can make. The mirror can copy a signal. It cannot copy what you refuse to show it. Now it is the last one for tonight, an oasis that sits off the end of the map and moves when you think you remember it. Story 5. Oasis at the end of the map. The first time the water moved, it took the stars with it. I watched the reflection slide across black glass and drift a few feet to the left, like the sky had loosened a tooth and pushed it with its tongue. If you have ever seen a lake relocate without wind, you know the kind of silence that follows. It is the kind that studies you. My name is Nad, short for Nadia, but the desert has always cut names down a bone. I chart backroads for a living, which is a poetic way to say I drive at night, photograph culverts and mileposts, and sell tidy maps to companies that confuse data with truth. Tonight was not work. Tonight was a favor I owed my brother, Sammy, who left a note on my fridge that said, "Page 88, find a well that moves," and then went 3 days without calling. He has done worse, but only when he was 20 and He is not 20 anymore. The wind kept his old music in its teeth and hummed it at me from the vents. My atlas lay open on the passenger seat under an empty thermos. Page 88 was torn at the bottom, the kind of tear that says someone tried to hide a circle they drew and then changed their mind. A pencil ring hugged a stretch of unnamed dirt that paralleled Route 30 and then wandered like a bored hand. 3 dots sat along the ring as if someone had thrown them down after counting. The digital map ended in a beige square that said road ends. My screen brightness dimmed to save a battery that did not love me. If I reached the last dot, I promised myself I would turn back. Promises are the currency night accepts. The air cooled without warning. A scent rose that did not belong to this hour, wet stone and old shade. I rolled the window down, and the wind brought a sound I could not place at first. It was delicate. Not birds, not insects. Glass. No, metal. Keys, chiming against each other like silver grasshoppers. I pulled off onto the service track that split the creosote at a shy angle and let the tires bite gravel that had been crushed by bigger tires than mine. My watch said 3:33 and then thought better of it and froze. The first disturbance was small enough to ignore. My thermos left a wet ring on the dashboard, even though I had drained it at the last legit station. I touched the ring and my finger came away damp. Condensation does tricks in the desert when you are tired. I could catalog them for you in a list that would put you to sleep. The ring made a circle around my fingertip, and for a second it looked like the pencil ring on page 88, only broken where my nail pressed. I wiped it with my sleeve, and the fabric stayed dry. The road gave up its pretense of being one and became tracks. My headlights swept and returned with brush, rock, brush again. The wind chimes got louder. I eased to a crawl. On my right, hanging from a low mesquite, hundreds of keys dangled on fishing line, all sizes, all metals, from old skeleton teeth to modern fobs with dead buttons. They sang when the wind rose and fell when it settled, and the song had a pattern my brain wanted to read the way you read night chart. My scalp prickled. I said Sammy's name like a question, and the chimes answered with the sound of a mouth getting ready to speak. I tell myself I do not spook. It keeps me paid, but unknown before danger is a law here. When the thermos ring vanished from the dash mid-blink, that counted. When my watch refused to leave 3:33 as if the hands were pinned under glass, that counted too. I pressed my fingers to the watch face like warmth could coax it, and the second hand twitched once like a trapped fish. I told the desert I was not impressed, which is a ritual that never works. The first beat of the dread ladder is always an invitation you should decline. The water appeared between 2 low ridges like a mouth, unsure whether to smile. It was impossible not to see it, and impossible in the other sense too. A circlet of black mirror in a bowl of dust. Stars lay in it like coins. The surface trembled in a wind that I did not feel. On the bank, a plastic jug waited with a funnel tucked inside. Someone had done homework. A sign staked into the ground said, "Drink slow," in a hand I almost recognized. The letters leaned right, the way my brothers used to before life straightened him. I stood on the gravel and watched the bowl for 3 full breaths. The cold mineral smell was strong enough to make my teeth ache. The keys and mesquite behind me chimed 3 times, then went quiet. I bent to touch the water, and my reflection did not touch back. It hovered an inch deeper than it should have, like a camera misfocused. I looked up too fast, and the stars in the water were not the stars above. They were a neighbor's set, almost the same, not quite. The thermos ring flashed in the corner of my eye, and then was gone again. Beat 2 came with the radio. I do not use CB often, but the desert asks you to carry old tools. Channel 9 coughed up a voice with the calm texture of a ranger on a long night. Female. Patient. She said, "If you can hear this, stay with the water. Do not attempt to drive across the flats. Help is en route at first light." I held the mic and did not key it. The voice continued as if I had. She said my name, clean and gentle, the way nurses say it when they wake you in recovery. I asked, "Who is this?" And the radio stayed quiet long enough that I heard the keys answer instead, a ring that liked to tuck itself behind words. I went back to the atlas and checked page 88. The pencil circle smiled up like a dare. The 3 dots sat along its edge like stars pretending to be numbers. The last dot lined up with a shadowed trough to my northwest. If the water moved, it moved along that ring. I set the compass on the centerfold and aligned north with north and felt foolish and alive. The digital map still said road ends. The beige square felt like a shrug. Beat 3 tightened its grip. My watch hovered at 3:33 and the second hand trembled. The ranger voice returned in a sweeter register and said, "Nad, if you can hear me, blink your high beams twice." I do not need to tell you that I did it. Habit is a tyrant. The water answered by sliding a little left, not much, just a few feet, and the star pattern in it changed like a face deciding to show its better side. The keys chimed once. My phone woke unhelpfully and displayed my brother's last text from last spring. The one that said bring limes next time, the good ones. It sat there on the screen like a trick. Isolation arrived on time. The track I had followed widened into a flat with many tracks, all of them ending in circles like animals turning before they laid down to vanish. I tried to send my location to myself anyway. Delivery failed. The phone said, like a friend refusing to carry a secret. The radio crackled and said, "Stay by the water. Movement draws them," and the them did not explain itself. I said, "Who is them?" And the radio gave me my own breath back, a thin hush. In the mesquite, the keys rattled without wind, a warning with no meaning. The meaningful choice was rude and precise. I could pour my remaining clean water into the radiator to tame the temperature light that had begun flirting on the dash, or I could drink and trust mechanics to forgive me. I stood with the hood up and the jug in my hand and the cold mineral smell on my tongue. The ranger voice said, "Sip, Nad, sip," and the word sip made my throat greedy. I looked at the plastic funnel sitting in its halo of fall starlight and thought about the wet ring that kept appearing and vanishing on my dash like a conscience. Consequence needs witnesses. The keys chimed once, twice, then 3, small and quick, as if counting down. I made my decision and poured the water into the radiator. Steam whispered and then smiled itself thin. My mouth punished me with salt. Immediate consequence. The delayed echo arrived later, after I had to decide again in a darker place. But for now my car thanked me with a needle that calmed itself a 1/4 inch. Revelation belongs to people who stare longer than is comfortable. The Oasis was not water the way we mean it. It was a map error made solid. A soft zone where the terrain referenced the drawing instead of the other way around. The pencil circle on the atlas was a corridor. The 3 dots were positions it takes every reset. The smell of wet stone came when the ring shifted. The keys hung to speak when no one else could, their metal letters ringing a new punctuation each time the pool moved. The ranger voice on the radio was a recording the wind had learned. The detail that broke the red herring was simple. When I held the mic and asked a question, the voice never paused where a person would breathe. It paused where the keys did. The point of no return came at my watch's mercy. The second hand shivered and ticked once in a 3:34, as if some debt had been paid. The ring on my dash reappeared, wet and honest, and did not vanish when I blinked. That was the window. I could stand and drink from a reflection that borrowed stars, or I could do what my hands have always done, draw the line no one else sees and follow it. I tore the bottom strip from page 88, the torn parts Sammy had tried to hide, and taped it to the windshield with painter's tape from my kit. I aligned the pencil circle to the horizon by choosing 2 mesquite peaks and a notch in the ridgeline, the way you would in the field when a surveyed GPS throws a tantrum. Then I darkened the circle with the side of my pencil until it glowed graphite against the glass. The will felt good in my palms. The wind pulled him from the keys. The pool sighed and shifted closer, like a cat pretending it is not begging. The climax is where you put your name on a guess. I started to drive along the circle I had drawn, slow, keeping the ridgeline in the pencil as if I were tracing on thin paper. The pool slid in parallel, not chasing, not running, keeping its place on the ring with the self-respect of an animal that knows it is beautiful. The stars in it shifted with each foot of gravel I claimed. The radio whispered the ranger's fine voice, "Please remain by the water," but the keys cut across with a clash that sounded like no, and I trusted metal over manners. At the first out on the Atlas, nothing changed but the smell. Wet stone deepened until I could taste it in my gums. At the second, my headlights wavered with a heat shimmer that did not belong to the air and then steadied as if the road had made a decision. At the third, the pool moved far enough left that it revealed a dry seam like a scar, a pale ribbon of packed crust that did not reflect. 2 dragonflies rose out of that seam as if 2 thoughts had changed their minds. Night dragonflies do not perform for mirages. They go where real water hides. I killed the radio, and the voice died with a soft click that sounded relieved. I rolled onto the seam at an angle and felt the car lift like a patient sitting up too fast. The keys went almost silent, then picked up again with a brittle ring. The pool stopped moving. The stars in it sighed and chose positions that matched the sky the way good copies do. I turned the wheel a 1/4 inch to keep the pencil circle on its ridge notch and eased the car along until the seam widened and the tires found honest gravel. The Oasis watched, which is a sentence that should not be true, and then did the only thing it knows how to do. It slid back to the position I had found it at first and gathered its borrowed sky and waited for a different version of me to greet it. Cars leave trails here that do not match when morning comes. That is how the desert keeps secrets. The watch ticked to 3:35 and kept going. Fallout is the sound of your thirst when you have chosen not to drink. I parked at the edge of a shallow, seep the dragonflies had blessed. Real water clung there like a coin in a cracked plate. I filled the thermos a 1/3 full and let it warm in my hands before I took a mouthful. It tasted like iron and shade and truth. I poured the rest over my head, and the cold shocked a laugh out of me that I would deny if you asked. The wind moved across the keys and found a low harmony. The ring on the dash dried in the slow, ordinary way rings dry. I looked once at the pool in the bowl. It sat mirror still, generous, smug, reluctant. A plastic funnel waited on the bank like a kindness you regret accepting. I drove back to the service track slow enough to memorize how the brush leans and how the mesquite lowers its shoulders before dawn. My phone crawled back to life and found a voicemail from my brother Time stamped yesterday at 3:33. He did not speak. He breathed. Behind his breath, I heard keys chiming in an off rhythm, like someone counting wrong on purpose. I reached Route 30 as the eastern edge of the world diluted from ink to milk. My watch ticked with the righteous boredom of cheap machines. The Atlas sat open on the seat with page 88 torn as ever, but the pencil circle had smudged darker against my fingers and left graphite on my skin, proof that sometimes the map trusts you back. At home I hung my keys on a hook and listened. They stayed quiet. Most nights they do.